Hey everybody, Dylan Distraction here, coming to you live from Atlantic Studios. Thought I'd do a quick back to the drawing board talk about comic book shorts on my drawing table and Nuke Force. Working on Nuke Force, my creator-owned comic book series. This is going to be on Kickstarter, coming soon. So definitely sign up for alerts. I don't know, do people still do that? Yeah, go to my website, DylanAndrewsArt.com, DylanDistraction.com, make comics cool, Batlantic Store, Batlantic Studios. Got a bunch of fun stuff coming up this year. Really appreciative of everyone that continues to support my work. I am going to do some coloring. That's right. Not my favorite part of the creative process, but I really love the results working with these craft tone brushes, these dot pattern brushes. I think the look of it feels really vintage comic books to me. And I'm a fan of that look. So what I have done is I'm using True Grit Texture Supply and Craft Tone Dots is what these are called. And I'm using them at a reduced amount, so they're 50% of the standard size at 400 dpi. So that's why when you get the finished printed comic, you might not even realize that it's made up of this dot pattern, but I think the result looks really cool. I'm really happy with it, so I'm just gonna keep working like this until people either love it and tell me how awesome it is, or they just don't, and I never know. So if you enjoy this and you think it looks cool, please let me know, because I think it looks cool. But I don't know, maybe people are like, oh boy, I'd much rather have Professor Distraction do something different than these craft tone dot colors. You know what? Even if you don't like it, I'm still doing it. I think it looks cool. I love vintage comics. I love classic Ramita. So this is in my next to my drawing table right here. Classic Ramita. So you see like yellowy paper technique, right? Love this stuff. So this is the kind of stuff that's next to my drawing table. That's the kind of stuff I'm going for. So hopefully you dig it. I love this kind of style. I love the work I'm currently producing, and it's an evolution. I definitely have tried to evolve and change and grow and adapt, and I think you have to, and I think it's kind of inevitable as a professional or as an artist or as an illustrator or a cartoonist, is that you see things around you and you get inspired by stuff and you're like, I could put a little bit of that spice in the recipe. So you try it and maybe it goes the way you want it to, or maybe you reevaluate and move forward. And I think it's less about trying to find what an audience wants. And I know, or I think that there are some publishers and some creators that's kind of their focus. Like, well, what would sell really well? And you see that a lot. You saw that a lot in the 90s where they're like, oh, this works. Let's just do this for everything. And it's like, oh, geez, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, it might just kind of burn it out if everybody's doing that. That's why it's great to have a different variety, a bunch of different creators doing a bunch of different styles and techniques. I like this, so I'm going to do this. So hopefully you like this too, because I like this. I love classic comics. I love 90s comics, but I love 80s and 70s comics too. And I buy a lot of my comics at, like, antique stores. I do go to comic book stores. I love comic book stores. There's less and less of them, and they're further and further from me, which is disappointing. I used to be able to just go to, as you know, how many like dispensaries there are in Maine now? That used to be comic book stores. There used to be comic book stores across the street from comic book stores, and Biddeford had like a few. And whenever one closed, a new one would pop open, and then they all just closed. So back in the day, it was much different than it is now. And now, when you have dispensaries across the street from dispensaries, that was comic book stores in the 90s until the bubble burst. But that's the thing about the comic book industry and being a comic book fan and creator, is it's always changing and it's always boom and bust. And it just seems like that's how it's always gone. I mean, if you think about Superman and Siegel and Schuster getting their character essentially stolen from them all those years ago, and then Superman becoming the biggest thing in entertainment, selling millions of copies, and then superheroes were kind of blah, and then till the Fantastic Four brought back a superhero-ish kind of story. And I'd say even the Fantastic Four was more of a sci-fi, sci-fi monster comic that happened to have people who were trying to help others. They, I don't know if superhero is even something that Kirby and Stan Lee were going for at the time. I don't know. So interesting to see how much things change, how much they improve, and how much they get worse, get better, get worse. So what I did right there is I have multiple layers set up. So that's a cyan layer. We're dropping cyan in at different percentages, so 20, 50, 70, 100, and pressure. And then this is the yellow plate, and I just dropped in 100% yellow. It looks cool. Now probably what I would do is I'd select the yellow brush, and we'll drop in a little bit. We'll just do some highlights. So I do the eraser through here, maybe some eraser through there. Like that, and we'll fill that with that, and then we'll fill that with that, and that kind of gives it a little bit of a highlight, which will make it look more three-dimensional. But I like it to look like flat colors, so I don't want to get too much into rendering. Pretty much what I would do is just this little sort of rim light here, like that, and then maybe something over there. I don't like that at all. Get rid of that. So this is Toxic Nightmare from issue, what issue is this? 3? Yeah, I think I'm working on issue 3. It's all just one big story. I just broke it up into chapters essentially. So this is like chapter 3. But the Kickstarter will, I'm assuming, contain, depending on stretch goals and what I'm able to accomplish, I'm assuming that I'll have a few. It's like unlock issue 2, unlock issue 3. We'll see how far we get. I want to have it ready to go. So that's Toxic Nightmare, bam, boom, bam. And then I'll drop in paper texture, right? And get rid of the guides. And then that's what a finished would look like, right? So you probably won't zoom in this much when reading it, but you could. Wow, look at those great dots. Wow. So it's got the paper grit texture. Turn off the, which just, it once it's printed, it looks, it doesn't look as obvious. It just kind of falls in the background. It's got paper, and then it's got this grit on it. So it's got double grit. So especially see here in the black, that sort of grit. So paper and grit, combine those two together, and you have what appears to be a classic comic book for a modern reader. Nuke Force, classic comics for modern readers. But I don't like the color with the yellow plate on, with the paper and stuff on, so I turn that off usually. All right, so now I got to do this panel here. And what I'll do for this panel is another rectangle. That's not going to work. I like to just kind of put a rectangle around it so I can throw in color more easily. Let's do the yellow. We're on yellow, so let's go yellow plate. We're going to go 100% yellow. Major grit is 100% yellow. And this also, at this point, since I have gone and inked other pages since this one, if at any point I see anything in this one, I'm like, I don't know if I'm thrilled about that, I'll go back in and change it. But it's always kind of good to see it in color first, because that kind of will change my opinion sometimes on the inking. And that's one of the great things about digitally inking, is I can go, yeah, that works, great, let's keep going. Or I can go, geez, I should revise that or change that. So digital inking, I can. It's always kind of ready to be reworked, which is good and bad, because it does never feel done till it's printed. So that often means I gotta print them, and that's fine. But if I didn't ever get a printed copy, I would always feel like I could rework that, I could redo that. So I love printing comics though, so not a big deal. It just costs money, which is fine, but just gotta keep selling more comics. The more comics I sell, the more comics I can print. And yeah, things are definitely challenging right now for comic books. But when have they ever not been? Right? At what point in the history of publishing has it ever gone super smoothly? Feels like there's always been something, always been some challenge. Even in the 40s, you're like, oh man, Superman and Batman. Wow, this isn't thinly veiled organized crime at all. These publishers are not. Yeah, no, this is a real business. And then you're like, oh no, these are all just gangsters trying to make money and then launder cash for the mob. And then World War II. So you're like, oh, great. All of you talented creators, see ya. Have fun over in Europe. Okay. And that's just kind of how that went. And then it's just, I mean, it's Siegel and Schuster. Like, I was just watching a documentary on them, and I'm like, oh my God. And Schuster just, I think it was Schuster. I think so. Or maybe it was Siegel. I don't know. The estate just sued again because they're releasing that new James Gunn Superman movie. And so the families of the late Siegel and Schuster, or one or the other, were like, nope, you don't have the international rights to distribute Superman. We do. Here's a lawsuit. And you're like, yeah, no, I get it. I want to see that Superman movie, but I want to make sure that the creators are given credit and compensation for their creations. And the comic book industry has not always been great about that. But if you look at Schultz, right, you look at syndicated cartoon strips in newspapers, Schultz had the rights to license all that stuff. And the Schultz estate, they just did a big Apple TV deal. So that's why you have Peanuts on Apple TV, which is great, by the way. There's a bunch of great Peanuts cartoons. They're really, really good. And I love Schultz's Peanuts and Snoopy and Charlie Brown, and it's just such great characters. But Schultz owned all that. He owned the copyright on all those. And so he could license them out as he wanted. Bill Watterson chose not to license anything, and he owns the rights to do that. He could. His family might once he's gone, but I don't know if it's as hot a licensable product now as it was back in the 90s. But possibly. I think people would probably still want to license it if his family decides to. But newspapers died. So newspapers didn't continue, partially because they didn't own the rights to Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes. So when Bill Watterson's like, I'm done, and he stopped doing it, he could. But Spider-Man's never going to stop, so Marvel's never going to stop. But newspapers didn't have the rights. They were all syndicated. So those syndicates lost the ability to control those characters. So they no longer could produce those characters. So they no longer could make money. So that's where we're at. Pretty interesting. Obviously, it's something that I'm connected with just because I love publishing. I love comic books. I love newspapers. I used to work in a newspaper. I think that it's really sad that that's not something that people will need or want anymore. It used to be standard. Everybody just got newspapers. They were very popular for a very long time. And now they are not. Why is this looking so weird? Oh, because I have the brush too small. So definitely things are changing. I'm excited for the future. I think there's really a lot of opportunities. I'm hoping that some smart, entrepreneurial, motivated people are able to create a way for everyone to benefit, publishers and creators, readers. That would be what I would want, because they're all important. The readers are incredibly important. The publishers are incredibly important. The creators are incredibly important. They're all really important. And now we realize how important distributors are. I don't know if people would have thought distribution was so important until it went away. And then you're like, oh, whoops. I didn't realize how important it was to have the ability to access these products. And it's like, oh, yeah, no, that's really a big part of it is retailers and distributors, wholesalers, and even the secondary speculators. Important. They're all important. Can't lose any of them. So we'll see how things go. I'm along for the ride. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep making comics. So hopefully you're along for the ride too. Hopefully you like seeing my work and supporting my work, because there's going to be a Kickstarter coming. Speaking of direct to consumer, I hate the term consumer. It sounds so impersonal. Direct to reader. Speaking of direct to reader, I am going to be doing Nuke Force on Kickstarter. So please check out DylanAndrewsArt.com, BatlanticStudios.com, MakeComicsCool.com. That's my Patreon. That's super helpful if people want to sign up there. Got a bunch of cool stuff coming up. And this is what it's going to look like. So if you like this, awesome. It's going to be more of this. Mr. Malto, Claudia, Pump Station, Major Grit versus Toxic Nightmare as he starts evolving. So here I am just going in and dropping in 31% gray, which is what I set the gray to here. So Mr. Malto's pants are a 31% gray. It's like a transparency. Essentially just makes a tone of gray, of black. So that's this right here. Like this. And then like this. I'm going to do that. And then these are gray. And his face is gray. And then I'll go in and, I don't know, I think the background I'm probably going to make solid green. Maybe because you want it to feel like it's in the same place. Maybe I'll make like a light green. Nice thing about drawing in like desolate nightmare hellscapes, colors can be whatever I want. So I'm like, I'll make the background green. Okay. And the thing is, like, you find that when doing a black and white comic, which I've done for years, I did a lot of black and white comics, you don't realize just how much the color will solidify the figures, if that makes any sense. So right now it feels like they're, like, even if I did the characters in full color, the background feels like it's not there. It just feels like, even with the paper texture, right, it's like they're just kind of floating. But if I drop in a solid green behind them, you're like, oh, that's in a space, like there's an environment. It takes longer, it's more time consuming to do it that way, but I really like the result. So that's why I'm going to keep doing it that way. So Mr. Malto's gray, and then let's drop in some magenta so you can kind of see what that's going to look like. So what if I turn off the yellow layer, right, blue layer, magenta layer. So magenta is just this solid pink color, but when mixed on press, back in the day when I worked in newspaper, the magenta was one of the spot colors you had, but it just looked like hot pink, so nobody wanted it. Everybody wanted solid cyan. That's why I had a lot of ads with blue, because they're like, the blue looks nice, the magenta just looks like hot pink, so nobody wanted it. But if you mix this, watch what happens. With the yellow, bam, you get red. Right? I think you can see that. Might not show up so great on the iPad, but that's what happens. So if I go 100% magenta and 100% yellow, I get the color red I use. And also, I think important to note, I have a good variety of colors. Like I can get a good mix of purples and greens and reds and blues with these very limited this very limited color palette. I'm using, my palette is this: cyan, magenta, yellow, black, white, and then like a rich black, and then that's just for creating blue lines. So with that very limited color palette, I can create entire comic books. And I like that limitation because I found that working digitally, I would get so bogged down with the coloring. It just was, there's too many options. And I saw Alex Sinclair, who was a colorist I'm a huge fan of. He worked for DC and with Jim Lee and has done a lot of Jim Lee, Scott Williams stuff. I took a couple classes and he would show off his palette, and he's like, this line is Superman, this line is Wonder Woman, and it was all just swatches. He's like, these swatches are Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. And you're like, and then I just tint the environment around them. So these are all approved by Warner Brothers at the time. These are the colors that I use, and then I tint the environment. So if you would, what that would mean was, he's like, see how I throw a yellow over that? It makes that, right, feel like a different environment than if it's just like a blue light or a yellow light, and it really changes how everything looks. But he's like, I don't vary from these other colors. Like, it's these colors. And I thought that was profound. I'm like, oh, wait, there's not 1,000 different blues for Batman? It's like, no, it's a couple. It's like not 1,000 different skin tones for everybody. No, just a few. And you're like, oh, well, that's what they did with classic comics. They just had a smaller number of colors to pull from, but it didn't make it any less visually interesting. If anything, I think it makes some of those classic comics look more visually interesting than the color choices now. I saw a comic book recently, I'm not going to name it, but it was so much purples and pinks and these blue tones, and I was like, I can't see the line work. I don't know what the line work looks like. With this, what I would want is you can see the line work. I spend a lot of time trying to ink these things. I don't want it to be smothered by 1,000 pastel purples. Like, I want it to kind of still have that pop. So this is how I go through and color stuff. Mr. Malto now looks red, which is what you want because he is a volcano man. Major Grit, the power of gravity. Here we go. Gravity power guy. Controls Earth. Earth. Wind. Cloudy as wind. Fire. Mr. Malto. Water. Obviously pump station. All the elements on a super team. Nuke force. Powered by nuclear energy. Alright, so there's what skin tones look like. Magenta and yellow. And it takes a second for your eye to go, what? That's skin tone? That looks like giant dots. But then you're like, no, when that prints, it's just going to look like a flat pinkish hue. It's gonna be great. So let's do Claudia's face here. Like that. It's a bit of a optical illusion, but it works. Claudia's hands. Let's turn off this paper texture so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm just double tapping between eraser and brush. So, DylanDistraction.com, Dylan Andrews Art, make comics cool. Kickstarter coming soon for Nuke Force. Classic comics for modern readers. The Atomic Age Heroes, Nuke Force. Appreciate everybody watching, and check out my affiliate links. I got affiliate links down in the description, or up in the description. Check them out. Buying from my affiliate links helps me make more comics. So if you like my work and want to support it, grab something from the affiliate link. Okay, thanks. Bye.